Okay, well, let's talk about this now with the political scientist and author of Dollar Democracy, Professor Peter Matthews. He's in Long Beach, California. Professor, good morning. Thanks for joining us. So what do you make of this admission by Ecuador that it has indeed cut Assange's internet connection?
Very interesting. They're saying that they don't want to interfere in the American election, but by actually cutting the internet connection, they're actually, in a sense, influencing the American election because these leaks are going to stop now. And they were quite devastating to the Hillary Clinton campaign. It showed quite a bit of negative attributes to her campaign and also to her character to some extent. So this is a boon for her in one way, and yet again, it might also be seen as an influence by just cutting off the access to the internet, having influence in its own ways, in a very, very interesting way. So that's going to be, this is coming so close, 3 weeks before the election, and one day before the major third debate coming up tomorrow, where they'll be discussing immigration and the Supreme Court justices, the economy, and foreign policy, of all the topics coming up tomorrow in the debate. So it will be a very interesting week to see what happens.
Well, the Ecuadorians have said that they weren't put under any pressure to do this. But do you think they were?
Well, anyone observing from the outside, I don't have any inside information on this, but observing from the outside, it looks like Ecuador is a very small country, right? The U.S. is a huge country which has oil interests in Ecuador. It's got influence through economic means and export-import situation and trade. And I mean, certainly the U.S. government, the President Obama, who supports Hillary Clinton, did not want these kind of leaks to continue. They've already had a negative impact on her earlier, and they started to have a negative impact again, even though Donald Trump has suffered himself from the revelation of his videotapes and audio tapes where he had misogynistic comments and remarks about women. This balanced it out to some extent, and it's very interesting right now. The race is very close in three major swing states: Ohio, North Carolina, and Nevada. Trump is ahead by a good margin in Ohio, and Hillary's ahead by a couple of points in the other two states. So the swing states are the key. Anything can influence them, and the WikiLeaks continuing would possibly influence them in one way or the other. So this is something that, of course, the U.S. did not want Ecuador to continue giving him access. I don't know what was actually done to stop them, and Ecuador wouldn't admit it anyway if there was any pressure put on it.
Well, then perhaps Trump does have a point about these elections and how the media is influencing them, and indeed what the U.S. is doing to influence them.
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it that there were powers that be in the Democratic primary, that, for example, the DNC and Deborah Wasserman Schultz, who they favored Hillary Clinton over Bernie Sanders. It was very clear to many people observing back then, in some ways or the other, through various machinations. And then they found out that the WikiLeaks emails actually showed that this actually happened. And Deborah Wasserman Schultz had to resign as a result. That's a very big indicator that it wasn't a fair primary season in some ways. And now we're looking at that influence over the election in the primaries. What about in the general election? So Donald Trump might be taken seriously in his comments by some people, including his own supporters very much so. I'm not sure he's got enough support to overcome these allegations of his sexual peccadillos, let's put it that way, especially the verbal comments about women that were derogatory, misogynistic, that might have actually pushed him down so far that he can't come back up. On the other hand, this isn't over till it's over, right? 3 weeks. October surprises come in October. This is going to be very interesting to see what happens further. And there are still more WikiLeaks emails that are being revealed gradually, step by step. They're still coming out because a bunch of them had been dumped already before he lost access to the internet.
Okay, well, we've got 3 weeks to go until the election. We've got less than 24 hours to go until this final debate. What can we expect?
Well, I want them to talk about the issues of the economy. How are they going to create jobs? The official unemployment rate is 5%, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the Obama Labor Department. 5%. And in reality, it's more like 10% unemployment if you look at the underemployment, those who've been looking for work and couldn't find it, those who have been laid off permanently and have given up on looking for work because they've stopped looking a year ago, those who are partly employed, part-time. If you look at all that, what's called the U6 unemployment rate, which is the real unemployment, it's 10% or over of the population, the working population, which means about close to 16%, 16 million Americans underemployed or unemployed. And that's a huge number, and they have relatives that will spin off to give more favorability to changing the government, to move from the present administration and those that seem to support it, like Hillary Clinton, to move to the other sides. That's what's driving things in Donald Trump's favor. the fact that people are dissatisfied with the economy, with their future. Many working people, many working class Democrats have switched over to the Republican side to vote for Trump. That's one reason he's even somewhat competitive. So this is a major issue, and I want them to talk about the economy. What are their plans? Donald Trump says he's going to put up tariffs to block, tax products coming back from China and from Mexico, the cheap labor countries where American corporations take jobs over there, in order to stem the outsourcing of our jobs. That's a very appealing statement to blue-collar workers in Pennsylvania and Ohio, and other workers who've lost their jobs and for 20 years have not had decent jobs. Two-thirds of the new jobs created, which by the way was about 10 million jobs, new jobs created, net new jobs created by President Obama's administration, 10 million since the recovery and since he came into office. And yet that's less than what under Bill Clinton. There were 16 million jobs created, actually more like doubled that, almost doubled that, 20 million jobs created under Bill Clinton. And under President Reagan, it was a little bit over 10 million. So the Obama record, while it kept the United States from going into a great recession, it's not a great record to be very happy about when it comes to a lot of voters who are unemployed, underemployed, who see the children's future going down the drain or not picking up. The children of many workers and middle-class people are having a very difficult time in college. They can't seem to afford the college tuition. They go into debt. The average debt in students coming out of college, there are 40 million American college graduates today with bachelor's degrees with a debt burden of $30,000 each. That's $1.3 trillion student debt. Now, what are they doing to address this? Hillary talks about bringing in a debt-free education with having free tuitions for students whose parents make less than $125,000 a year. But what about the students who are already in debt? What's she going to do about their debt burden? Will she cancel it? As other candidate Jill Stein has said she would do. The Green Party candidate Jill Stein said she would cancel the student debt, have the federal government bail out the student debt like they bail the banks out. Gary Johnson, the Libertarian, has other ideas. I would like to have seen all four candidates on the platform tomorrow, but we only have a choice of two, and the public already knows these two, and they're not very satisfied with either of them. They're the most unpopular candidates in modern history. So let's see what happens. It may be a race to the bottom in a sense, because if they keep on this negative campaigning, ultimately what's going to happen is there'll be a low voter turnout. When there's low voter turnout, guess who wins usually? The Republican side wins. Because when there's low voter turnout, Democrats are the ones that tend to stay home. So this is going to be a very interesting election. If I were to have to bet the whole market, the whole bank on it, I would say that Hillary's probably going to win this at this point. But we don't know what could happen. We know that Donald Trump has come out of being behind before, and who knows what could happen in the next 3 weeks. It's going to be great to watch it, though, as a political analyst especially.